we are in public session now, and I would entertain a motion. Eileen.
Make a motion to award the contract for the one-stop operator, I don't know if you need the amount, from motion to the Vermont Department of Labor.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Dennis.
Okay, I made a motion.
Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? No roll call. There will be a number of folks that will be listed as abstaining who've recused themselves, and that'll appear in the minutes. Okay, now we can get everybody else back in the room. Just want to hang out. Yeah. Thank you, and thank the members of the operating committee. We went through a pretty rigorous process. We had no way of knowing who was going to bid or what was going to happen, and thank goodness we had Abby, who I might tell everybody today is her last day with us. But good news, she's going to the tax department, and she's going to be the tax policy analyst for the state, which is pretty awesome. So we wish you the very best. You did an outstanding job here, and thank you so much. I think the rest of the folks are going to come in. Michelle, does everyone else know to come back? Okay. So I just, while we're waiting here, yesterday I had a meeting with the governor-elect and went through with him what we had been working on, and he had been following a lot of our work, and I hope to do the same with the speaker elect as well, and the president pro tem elect I've already met with as well, to let them know what our work is and what we're focusing on. And I certainly know Mitzi Johnson knows the budget probably better than most people. So I'm looking forward to trying to get a time on her calendar. And Tim Ash appears that he'll be elected the president pro tem, and he is very focused on this area. Governor-elect Scott asked great questions, very focused on this area, on workforce and economic development, commerce. So it was very, very good. And we gave them a ton of information that we've been working on here. So that was pretty productive. So people are coming back in the room, and thank you. One quick commercial here. Former board member and his wife had twins yesterday. Dan Smith, former president of Vermont Technical College and a number of other things. Dan and Lindsay had twin boys yesterday, and everyone is healthy and happy and doing well. They had no idea what they were having. They're just praying that the two children would be healthy and everything's good. So there's two new Smiths in the world now, so you can only get ready.
I apologize. Well, there may be more spaces if people, board members who are entering want to get at a table. You'll have to squeeze in or just make yourself more comfortable in the chairs, whatever.
Okay, Seth, if you want to come up now, I want to introduce Seth Bowden, who is my colleague at GBIC, is Vice President of GBIC, and he generously agreed to facilitate our next portion of the meeting here today, and it will take us through that. But before, Lisa Ventriss, who's the president of the Vermont Business Roundtable, is here with us today. And Lisa's led a number of initiatives at the Vermont Business Roundtable. They kind of put pre-K on the agenda like 15 years ago, before anyone was thinking of pre-K, and the Roundtable's done a bunch of incredible work. This year, I'll let Lisa tell. One of the ideas that had percolated up through this group was the concept of talent pipeline management. And in the midst of all this, Heather Boucher from the Agency of Education was on this as well and applied for a grant. And Michelle and Heather and Lisa and Commissioner John Goldstein went and made a presentation to a national group that had opened up this grant opportunity. And Lisa came back so inspired that she went and met with the board of directors of the Vermont Business Roundtable, which is a statewide organization of about 130 CEOs. And the Roundtable is going to take on this project, at least for the next year or so. So when we get into the short list of what emanated up from your response, this was one of the things. If you want it to be one of your 5 priorities, you can. If you don't, what might be good is just an endorsement of support for this. The Roundtable is going to take the ball and run with it, so it's going to probably happen faster than maybe some of the other things on our initiative. But Lisa, would you come up and explain what you're doing and what you experienced, and also thank you in the Roundtable for yet again stepping up.
As Lisa comes up, I just want to make sure that you're introduced to a few new members today, that we now have Brian Kearns and Nate Beach. Brian, you could stand up and tell us who you're with.
Rutland Regional Management Center. I head up the Human Resource Department and a few other areas there. Glad to be part of the board.
And his predecessor retired, and so he has taken that slot. And then we have Nate Beach.
Right here? Yeah. The plant manager at GE Aviation, also in Rutland, replaced Andy Batista, who retired in board this year.
So
Great.
that's wonderful.
And
we also
thank you folks
yeah,
for
thank you.
doing
And
this.
Dave Wheel is
Thanks. I'm Dave Wheel with Vermont Employer Support of the Garden Reserve, and I'm replacing Rob Bridges, who I think has finally retired.
thank you.
Thank you. And incidentally, we just had a deployment of half of the Vermont Air National Guard who've been deployed overseas and are in some pretty nasty territory now for the next 3 to 6 months. Half of the fleet of F-16s were mobilized out of Burlington, and they've been activated into the Air Force. So this is how we conduct defense and other operations of defense now. And it's, the folks, I think the last crew leaves, when did they today?
They left this morning. The
Okay.
two jet squads left, one at 12:30 in the morning and then the second one at 2 o'clock this morning. So, and they were after the deployment of 182 support crew. So maintenance people, IT, health, intel, all of that. So it's a very, very important day. A lot of pride on the base yesterday, and now we all get to pray for them and their safe return. So, Frank, thank you for the invitation to speak today. I'll be brief because I know you have a lengthy agenda. But Frank was correct in saying that for the last couple of years, the Roundtable, through our economic development and then our education working groups, had been trying to address the issue of workforce preparation, college and career readiness for our students. And we found that our groups were kind of working closer and closer together. So we blew everything up, and we are now in 2017 going to focus on one topic, which is career and college readiness. And that will be the way that we marshal all of our member interests around this topic. The Talent Pipeline Management Project that Frank was referring to is an initiative of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they've been conducting some presentations around the country. And in essence, what I will describe to you is an employer-led initiative that brings the real-time business interests and needs for their workforce into collaborations with educators and economic development service providers, so that it drives, it's a demand-driven process where business is much more granular in expressing its needs and the qualifications and the requirements that they need students to have coming out of those pipelines. So this meeting that we had yesterday had 40 people in attendance. We had representatives of manufacturers, healthcare industries, technology companies, recreation, food and beverage industries, as well as representatives from economic development corporations and education providers. So superintendents, college presidents as well. So it was a very robust conversation around what this model looks like. And at the end of the day, we, I think, ended up in a really good place. But the features of this model really are designed to follow several principles that our group was talking about. And people in the business world speak in terms of supply chain management and how you really let your business imperatives drive everything else around your company. So imagine if you take that same principle and apply it to your talent needs. It's in the context that I'm talking about. The principle of organizing and managing really flexible and effective partnerships, again with the three stakeholder groups that I've described, is important to the success of these. And then once you get those collaborations in place and you get the needs of the business influencing and impacting the type of education and level of expertise that students are acquiring, then you evaluate that later on to find out where those very rich talent pools are coming from. And in the business model, you start incentivizing more of that production. So what we talked about at a very high hover was how we help education institutions understand exactly what business needs, and then help develop those curricula or those programs for students to get the necessary education and training. So that's kind of the organizational model of it. And then once we started having a conversation a little bit around some of the strategies that these collaboratives employ, I mentioned the importance of these new employer alliances. And part of what we talked about was, so Vermont as a small state is different from California and Illinois, where they have rich, deep industry sectors. In Vermont, we may not have the luxury of that. So we're talking about whether our collaboratives should be regionally organized or if they should be organized by industry sector. And we're not quite sure yet about which way to go. So that's ongoing conversation. Identifying those specific, our friend from the U.S. Chamber talked about these pain points that industry has. where the exact kind of person they're looking for and they can't find. So part of what we will be doing, bringing those employers together and trying to find where there's commonality and some consensus around those particular pain points will be a part of our next work. Then once we know what those pain points are, we communicate that back again to the education community and try to get some uptake there and some collaborations working in that level. And then once we start to see over time that we're getting the type of talent and prepared worker, then we start strengthening those relationships with those education communities and providing incentives, employer incentives back to those education communities. So for example, our friend from the U.S. Chamber was talking about Boeing. I happened to visit Boeing last year and it absolutely blew my mind. But Boeing has preferred relationships with 4 universities around the country, and that's where they get all of their engineers from. So what they had done over time was say, we need this precise type of talent. They went out to these colleges and universities, arranged for that type of degree program, that certification, and now that's the entire provider for their workforce of that particular type of worker. So on the Vermont level, we would be looking to try to find where we could establish those relationships with education institutions to get those skilled workers. So, and then obviously there's an evaluation loop and it feeds back into the beginning. That is the high hover of what it is we heard about in DC. We got really jazzed about it and came back to have a conversation about what would it take if we were to do this. And so our conversation yesterday was at times messy, as you might imagine it would be. Lots of questions asked by lots of people. But we gave employers the primary position, if you will, to articulate what they needed and what they were frustrated with, and also what was working well for them in terms of the workforce that they were getting. So it is employer designed and employer led, this model that I'm describing, and that is excuse me, different from a lot of the models we have operating in Vermont right now. So we're all getting our head wrapped around it, but there was enthusiasm. We ended up with a half dozen businesses that wanted to participate with this next conversation. So that's very encouraging. There were 4 representatives from regional development corporations all around the state that were very eager to partner and try to work on creating some collaboratives there, which is important to us because we want to make sure this is not just focused on one particular part of the state. So, and I'm looking at Joan in the back just to make sure if I'm missing any big nuggets of our day and the results of that conversation. But I was very encouraged by it, and I think it's a very timely initiative that we're focused on right now. So we'll do much more work beginning in January. But yes.
Did Boeing contribute financially to the development of the curriculum?
Yes, yes. A Vermont-centric example, we heard a presentation by Ben Reel from GW Plastics. So he was a part of the conversation yesterday as well, and he spoke about the 18-month process they went through, again, to very crisply define the kind of skill sets they need, and then how they're working with their school to get that type of work-based learning and curriculum in place so that those students can participate. So yes, but the idea is that business invests in this because they will be the beneficiary as well.
Yeah, I could just add to that point. GW invested quite a lot of time in developing that program, and that's great. right? As I know, I see Husky in a room, people spend management time on doing this, and so from the state perspective, we've recognized that, and we'll defray some of that expense with a portion of the Vermont Training Program funds, which are typically only available to full-time employees, but we recognize that pipeline development is such a key element of the future growth of the state. And so I feel like we have some pieces of the puzzle already. We have Act 77, which is great. We've got some pieces of money from the Vermont Training Program. What we would hope would be that there would be oversubscription, so that then it defines that, okay, this employer-driven initiative is driving, the demand, and we need to then supply it. And so a lot of the discussion the other day was great, because we really started understanding what people's misgivings or worries were, and we want to continue to have those. Ideally, the business associations and development corporations that could gather sets of employers would be key facilitators to bring this about, and the leadership of the Business Roundtable is very, very good for, a good omen that this could be brought to fruition. But it is a heavy lift. I mean, it's why it wasn't done before, I think,
Yeah.
right? I mean, is
Right,
that fair?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, and this is not just a roundtable gig. The success of it will be if we can get major business organizations and industry groups around the state also willing to participate and reach out to their memberships and help us expand that reach. That's how we'll build the depth of interest and focus on key job skills and make it a successful thing.
There's
So.
another hand somewhere.
Well, actually, I think you answered my question, but I had another quick question. You had said 3 stakeholder groups. Was that businesses or employers, educators, and what was the third? Like workforce?
So it was economic development, service providers, and education providers, and the business community.
Lisa, are you gonna do pilots? Is it,
So, when we have this next meeting of the employers, that will help us determine
Okay.
the structure for it. But yes, the intent is that we would be able to say, all right, we've got a handful of areas of interest, or some regions that are very interested in participating. Let's try to then build those out, knowing that we have to prepare the ones who will be actually riding herd on this process. So that's the infrastructure that's got to be built up for it as well. So that's an important part of the next phase.
I have one other quick question about so it's going to be driven by the industries that kind of come forward? Is there any discussion around priority sectors or industries or?
You can repeat the question.
Sure. So thank you. So the question was, were there priority industry sectors that kind of drove the invitation list? So we've worked with Joan to figure out where the low-hanging fruit was, if you will, or where the priorities established by the state already, which were manufacturing, healthcare, and technology. But we expanded the opportunity for other businesses to participate as well. So
Yeah, and I just
we
wanna-
will let the,
Yeah.
we talk about this, the network of the willing. Whoever wants to participate is going to show up, and that will then help guide us in whatever direction we go.
And just to add to that a little bit more, just the U.S. Chamber rep, this man named Jason Cisco, what he brought out is sometimes we do try to separate it in sector, but really it's the job. So for example, there are technology jobs in the arts and culture, or so we don't want to necessarily rule people out, but just rather have all these employers, even if they're in disparate industries, define the types of skills they need for entry level, middle level, more experienced level, so that we could have a cogent plan to get it developed.
Yes, sir.
Lisa, for one of the groups mentioned, can you describe the breadth of educators that were involved?
Sure. So the question was, what describe the educators who are in the room. So we had superintendents, we had college presidents, help me out, Joan. Who
Yeah,
else?
we had the Superintendent's Association, we had a superintendent from South Burlington.
Right.
We had
a teacher
we had
from.
a teacher from Randolph who teaches the GW plastics class.
Yeah.
We had Community College of Vermont present. Who else? Linden.
Yeah, Linden, Champlain College.
Champlain College. So it was a pretty broad. And Patrick was the chair of the board of South Burlington as well as VSAC.
VSAC, yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry?
so-
And the agency,
And the
of course,
agency,
yes.
right.
Madam Deputy Secretary was there. Oh, yeah, her, she's there. Great, well, thank you for your time. Perhaps at some point I'll come back and give an update on
Yeah.
progress.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Is anyone open to making a motion to endorse and support this initiative? Okay, is there a second? Second, any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, great. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll get rolling into our strategic priorities. Those of you on the phone, we'll mute it during this break, so you don't have to listen to all the background. Yes. Yes.
Did you mute already?
Pardon me?
Hi, it's Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
From where I am, it's pretty difficult to do this, so I have a bunch of priorities. I think what I